Hi again, everybody, and welcome back to Ivy English. I'm Bruce.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Wesley.
We have an article for you today entitled The Road to F1.
好，我们的中文标题是从 F4 到 F1 赛场角逐多激昂。
I'll read through the article for you on page 58 here. A symphony of roaring engines fills the air as the red lights vanish, propelling the Formula One cars into a furious rush. The competition on the track is fierce, but the battle for a seat on the grid begins long before the first race. Below Formula One are several series designed to nurture talent and prepare drivers for the ultimate challenge. Formula One, or F1. Formula One, often abbreviated as F1, is the most historic and prestigious form of motorsport, with its origins dating back to the first Grand Prix in 1946. Each team in F1 is responsible for designing its own chassis, which forms the car's structural base. Although teams do not manufacture their own engines, they can select from 4 suppliers. Notably, all teams must use tires from a single, exclusive manufacturer, but they can opt for different compounds depending on their needs. Formula 2, or F2, and Formula 3, or F3. F2 and F3, serving as vital stepping stones to F1, focus on drivers' talent by ensuring all teams use identical chassis, engines, and tires. This standardization offers a platform for drivers to exhibit their skills. F2 features longer races and more complex circuits, which push drivers to the limit of their physical and mental capabilities. In contrast, F3's less demanding entry into single-seater racing enables young drivers to refine their abilities before advancing. Formula 4, or F4. F4, the entry-level series in single-seater racing, is cost-effective and accessible for newcomers. Launched in 2014, F4 established itself as the newest stage in formula racing. Unlike the other levels, it doesn't have a global championship. Instead, individual countries host their own series. With several chassis and engine options available, F4 has an environment conducive to engineering innovation. The climb to F1 is steep, but these foundational series provide the essential training ground for future champions.
Okay, so our first paragraph is a very poetic description of a car race. A symphony of roaring engines fills the air as the red lights vanish, propelling the Formula One cars into a furious rush. So a symphony means a large group of musicians playing their instruments all together to create one sound or one song, one piece of music. And so in this case, it's not musicians playing together, but roaring engines starting together. And it does fill the air. I don't know if you've ever been, it's nothing like traffic on Zhongshan East Road in Taipei. It is about 50 times worse. And you already can't talk to your friend on Zhongshan East Road because you're just like, you have to shout at each other. So when you're at an F1 race, or actually any of these races, as soon as the engines turn on, you're just like, okay, I am alone with my thoughts now. Anyways, the red lights vanish, meaning all the brake lights of the cars stop being turned on because everyone is accelerating. It's a nice touch there, Marcus. I like that. So the red lights vanish, meaning all of the cars are going. And this propels the cars into a furious rush. A rush is when everyone is trying to get to the same place at the same time. Furious implies so much activity.
Yeah, you might hear people sometimes talk about the morning rush or the evening rush refers to, it used to be everybody worked until 5 or 6 o'clock, and during that time, everyone would leave the offices and get into their cars or go onto buses or subway systems if they had them, and there was a lot of activity at the end of the workday.
Which is why it's called rush hour.
好，所以这个 rush 它可以指大家都在冲，大家都这个挤在一起那种感觉。那在这里呢 a furious rush， 那 furious 就是很激烈的，它本来是很狂怒的 full of extreme anger， 或者是 full of intensity 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 就是强度非常的强，所以 furious 就是很狂怒很激烈的，这个 rush 就冲刺，大家就开始暴冲狂冲。那我们来看看这个句子，这个句子写得蛮有文学性的。一开始他说 a symphony 本来是交响乐，那什么的交响乐呢？这里是 roaring engines 的交响乐。 roaring 就是嘶吼的，英文我们常讲 roaring thunder， 那个打雷的时候轰轰轰，所以这个地方你可以说轰隆隆的那个声音，所以呢这个引擎的轰隆隆的声音所交伴出来的交响乐，那这样的交响乐 fills the air 充满在空气当中。as 是随着 the red lights 这个红灯， vanish 这个字呢可以指消失，可以指熄灭的意思，就是 pass out of sight 不见了 disappear 的意思。然后呢分词 propel 这个字呢是推动或者驱动的意思， to cause to move forward or onward， 所以驱策的这些 F1 的赛车呢进入一个 furious rush。
The competition on the track is fierce.But the battle for a seat on the grid begins long before the first race. Well, competition is a contest. On the track, these automobiles, these special racers, are on a very special surface as they go around and around or along a particular course. And, of course, everybody wants to be first, so there's a lot of competition. That's why we say the competition is fierce.Like some animals, say a bear attacking a moose, that would be an unwise move, but it would be life or death, and then we can say it's fierce.
There is a video of a moose chasing a bear, and the bear literally tries to swim away from the moose, and then the moose is like, oh, swimming? I can do that, and swims faster than the bear, and the bear was just freaking out. It finally ran into a building to get away from the moose, which freaked out the people watching the whole thing play out.
And the people and the bear exit the back door.
I mean, that's where the video ended, but the point of the video is do not mess with moose.Yeah,
这个麋鹿其实很大，它体格很巨大，所以有的时候连熊都怕它们。这个我在阿拉斯加的时候看到我住的地方，窗户2楼看出去就有一只 moose 在那里走。
Yeah,
很大，
they're taller
真的很大
than a first floor of a house. Yeah,
非常大的，所以这个很恐怖的。
Okay, I got to finish this sentence.
Yeah.
The competition is fierce, like one animal attacking another, but the battle for a seat on the grid. The battle here is a competition that is very fierce. For a seat on the grid, that means you have the honor of competing at a higher level of racing. Begins long before the first race. Now, the first race could be the first of a series of races on the same day, or it could be over a period of time.
所以呢 the competition on the track 就是赛车的车道赛道，所以赛道上的竞争呢 is fierce 很激烈。那我们常常讲 fierce competition 这两个放在一起就是很激烈的竞争，用 fierce 这个字，所以 fierce 可以表示激烈的意思，就是 intense。我们刚刚有讲到 intensity 这个地方形容词 intense， 这个 fierce 或者说 violent in force 就是很激烈，所以竞争赛道上的竞争很激烈。但是 the battle for a seat on the grid， 好 grid 在这里就是指赛车的起跑线， the starting positions of cars on the race course 就是指 grid， 所以 a seat on the grid 就是赛车起跑线上的一席之地，你要去 a battle for 你要去争这个赛车起跑线上的一席之地。那这样的一个竞争，这样的一个 battle begins long before the first race， 在第一场比赛之前老早就开始了。换句话说，你要能够在这个赛车起跑线上占有一席之地，这个不容易的事情。
Below Formula One are several series designed to nurture talent and prepare drivers for the ultimate challenge. So Formula One is the last or the highest level in the series of races. And below that, there's more than one series. There's several series that are about nurturing talent. If you nurture talent, it means you develop it. You help people grow to become good enough to then perform in Formula One, and also to help prepare them for this ultimate challenge, for the most difficult racing challenge in the world.
所以在 F1 底下有着 R， 有这个 several series， 有几个系列赛。那这些系列赛怎么样？但 are designed to 这些系列赛设计的目的是希望能够 nurture talent， 就是培育人才。我们中文讲培育人才，英文就可以说 nurture talent。注意那 talent 没有冠词，也没有复数。同时它也这些系列比赛也可以 prepare drivers for， 就让这些驾驶车手做好准备。为了什么做好准备呢？ For the ultimate challenge， 这个终极的挑战。Ultimate 就是终极的 final 的意思，就在这个赛场上面的终极挑战，你之前你要培育人才，还有同时要让这些车手准备好迎接这个终极挑战。
Now, you can see below here we have Formula 1 through Formula 4. They're all different, and we'll take one at a time. Formula 1, often abbreviated as F1, is the most historic and prestigious form of motorsport, with its origins dating back to the first Grand Prix in 1946. Well, a lot of sports date back long before then, but in racing, 1946 was the beginning of the Formula One racing. So it's the oldest, it's the most historic and prestigious form of motorsport. Prestigious is famous, and if you win, you're a real champion. If your car is the fastest, we're racing cars, so that can be called a motor sport. And all of this began in 1946, not long after the end of World War II.
I'm going to say that racing cars on a track is the innovation of F1. But before that, there was all these sort of long road trip races.
Cross-country.
Cross-country racing was the thing from the beginning of car making, which was in the late 1800s. Yeah. And so, this was an innovation. Let's race cars on a track.
好，所以 Angela 老师补充说，这个 F1 赛车就是他讲1946年开始，这个是在赛道上面赛车，这1946年开始。但是呢，其实在这个之前，从有汽车开始，人们就会开始赛车了，看谁的速度比较快。像美国有那种 cross country 这种赛车啊，就是开过一个田野啊，反正就是在野外的这种赛车。好，我们回来看这个句子。他说 Formula One， 然后呢，同位语告诉你 which is often abbreviated as。 To be abbreviated as 就是缩写成为，所以 Formula One 通常就缩写成为 F1。 它是 the most historic。Most historic 在这里指的是历史最悠久的意思， the most historic。 然后呢，也是 the most prestigious 就是受到尊崇的，有地位的。那它这个在这种 motor sport 就是赛车运动里面 F1 是地位最受到尊崇，也历史最悠久的。 With 后面加一个受词，再加一个分词修饰的受词的状态，这里一样的句型。他说 with its origins dating back to， origins 就是 with 的受词，那 dating 就是修饰这个受词，它的起源可以追溯到 dating back to， 追溯到第一次大奖赛，这是1946年的时候。
Each team in F1 is responsible for designing its own chassis. The chassis is the frame of the car. It's what everything sits on. And the chassis design matters a lot because it means how the wheels come on, how the thing holds together, where the engine sits. All of these things matter very much for how fast your car is going to go. Oh, they define chassis after the comment. They say, which forms the car's structural base. So it is the base structure of the car.
好，所以每一个队伍 F1 的每个队伍呢 is responsible for 要负责设计他们自己的 chassis 或者 chassis 就是这个车身的底盘，这个字也可以念 chassis。 那这个车身底盘呢，后面它修饰告诉你说它 forms 它构成了这个车的 structural base， 它结构上的一个基础或者底座。
Although teams do not manufacture their own engines, they can select from 4 suppliers. And engines are very, very complex, especially for racers, these very, very fast cars. There are 4 companies or 4 suppliers which specialize in these engines that are only used in Formula races.
所以虽然这些队伍呢，他们不制造自己的引擎，也就是说引擎不是自己做的，但是他们可以选择 select from 就从哪里做选择，他们可以从 4 suppliers 4个供应商里面做一个选择。
Notably, all teams must use tires from a single exclusive manufacturer. If you're exclusive, it means you're the only one. So we've said the only one manufacturer by saying single exclusive manufacturer. But by this, we're emphasizing that it's literally only one company. But even though it's only one company, the teams can opt for or can choose different compounds. By compounds, we mean the chemical makeup of the rubber that is in the tire, because that matters enormously as to how much the tire grips the road or how it handles turns or how fast you can go on these tires. So they can choose different compounds depending on their needs, depending on what they need.
好 notably 就是值得注意的是，所有的队伍呢必须要使用 tires， 而且是来自于一个单一的，然后呢 exclusive 就独家的，不对外开放的一家制造商，所以他们可以从4家引擎这个 suppliers 里面选一家来做他们的引擎，可是轮胎只能从一家来定，但是呢他们可以 opt for， 他们可以 choose， 可以选择不同的 compounds， 不同的配方啊，就是他们轮胎的那个材质可以有不同的配方 depending on their needs， 是他们自己的需求，他们可以去选择化学材料和橡胶的混合比例。
Okay, after Formula 1, guess what? There's a Formula 2 and a Formula 3. Let's look at those. F2 and F3, serving as vital stepping stones to F1, focus on drivers' talent by ensuring all teams use identical chassis, engines, and tires. So there's a kind of standardization. Some things in these F1 through F4 races are identical, the same, but we describe F2 and F3 as stepping stones to F1. On the way to F1, the driver's talents must be ensured by making certain things identical or standard, including the chassis, the structure of the car, the engines, and the tires, which we really have mentioned in the previous paragraph.
好，所以呢 F2 跟 F3 同位语用一个分词告诉你 serving as 他们有这个功能是 vital 就是非常重要的 extremely important 的 stepping stones to F1 是要通往 F1 的一个很重要的垫脚石。那这两个呢 F2 F3 focus on 他们专注于 drivers 车手的 talent 才华。那怎么样专注在车手的才华呢？ by 他们透过 ensuring 就是确保所有的队伍用的都是 identical 相同的 chassis 一样的车身底盘，还有引擎轮胎用的通通都是一样的，这样子所有条件都相等，就能看出来谁比较会开了。
So this standardization, the making all of the cars the same, this thing, offers a platform for drivers to exhibit their skills. So in F1, each team is making a different car. But in F2 and F3, the cars are all the same so that the drivers, the difference between drivers becomes more visible. So F2 and F3 are more about which driver is better, and F1 is much more about the whole team being better, the best driver plus the best car makers.
好，所以这样的一个 standardization 就是这个标准化统一的规格，所以大家开的车都一样，这样子就可以 offers 可以提供一个 platform 一个平台，让这些车手来 exhibit 展现他们的 skills 他们的驾驶技术。
F2 features longer races and more complex circuits, which push drivers to the limit of their physical and mental capabilities. Okay, F2 features, it is comprised of longer races. They go a further distance, and this means that drivers have to work harder because they're going over more complex routes as well as longer races. And that is very telling on people's physical and mental capabilities. This is not a laid-back ride in a car. It requires a great deal of physical strength and concentration, which also leads into your mental capability, how much you can focus on something for a certain amount of time. After all, it can be life or death.
所以呢，现在是他在比较 F2 跟 F3。他说 F2 features 它的特色是 longer races， 它的比赛比较长，跟 F3 比起来。还有呢，它赛道是 more complex， 你也可以说 more complex， 更复杂的 circuits， 就是它的环形赛道更复杂。那这样的两件事情呢 which 就是指赛程比较长，赛道比较复杂，就会 push someone to the limit of their physical and mental capabilities， 就是把某人的身体跟心理的能耐能力推到极限。 push to the limit 就是推到极限。那这里是把这个车手的 physical 跟 mental 身体跟心理的 capabilities 都推到极限。 capability 跟中文的能耐很像，它不只是能力，还表示 how much you can take 那种感觉，你的能耐在哪里。
Now, in contrast, F3's less demanding entry into single-seater racing enables young drivers to refine their abilities before advancing. Basically, F3 is not as hard as F2, but they're still doing single-seater racing. It's just one guy in a car. And to refine something means to get better at it. So you come into F3 and you learn how to get really good at driving a single-seater car, and then you go to F2 and learn how to do harder things in a single-seater car.
In contrast, 相比之下呢，这个 F3 它是 less demanding， 没有那么难的这样的一个 entry into， 就你要进入这个 single-seater racing， 单人坐的赛车不是那么难。这样的一个状况可以 enable young drivers， 可以让这些年轻的车手来 refine their abilities， 这个磨练他们的能力。 refine 就是 to bring to a finer state， 那 before advancing， 在他往上往前更进一步之前，可以让他好好的磨练他的能力。
All right, let's look and finish with Formula 4. F4, the entry-level series in single-seater racing, is cost-effective and accessible for newcomers. If it's entry-level, it's at the beginning of a series. Single-seater racing, we still have just one driver per car. Now, it's cheaper, it's cost-effective, and accessible for newcomers. It sort of invites more people to give it a try to see if they're going to eventually be Formula One material.
Instead of the same companies doing it over and over.
Yeah. 好，所以 F4 同位语告诉你，它是 the entry-level series. Entry-level 就入门等级的或者适合新手的这个系列赛呢，是在这个它是单人座赛车的入门等级的系列赛。所以 F4 它是 cost-effective， 它成本效益高，而且呢它是 accessible， 你可以取得的，容易进入的哈。For newcomers， 这对新手来讲比较好。
Launched in 2014, F4 established itself as the newest stage in Formula racing. If you establish yourself, you become part of the thing.
好 ，Yeah， 所以 launch 的推出，它是2014年开始推出。那 F4 它 established itself as， 它已经稳固的建立了自己，作为一个什么呢？作为 the newest stage 最新的一个阶段，一个阶级，在这个方程式赛车里面，它是最新的一个阶级。
Unlike the other levels, this is F4, doesn't have a global championship, which suggests that these races are more local.
Yeah, 所以和其他等级不同的是，这个 F4 它没有一个全球性的冠军，所以它没有世界冠军。
Instead, individual countries host their own series.
而是说个别的国家，每个国家各自主办他们自己的系列赛。
With several chassis and engine options available, F4 has an environment conducive to engineering innovation. So it's a way to improve the car, not just the driver.
With 什么什么 available 就是有这样的东西，所以我们有什么呢？有不同的这个车身底盘，还有这个不同的引擎的选择。在这样的情况之下 ，F4 它有一个环境，这个环境是 conducive to， 就是它有益于 engineering innovation， 它可以有益于工程的创新，大家可以试试怎么样做最好。
So the climb to F1 is steep. You're going up a steep slope of harder and harder levels, but these foundational series, meaning the 2, 3, and 4, provide the essential training ground for future champions.
好，那这个从 F1 往上的这个攀登是很陡峭 steep 的很陡峭，但是呢 这些就你要爬到 F1 不容易，但是这些 foundational 基础的这些系列赛提供了 essential 必要的一个 training ground 一个训练的场地，对于未来的冠军来讲是很必要的这个训练的地方。
So we have some questions here for you. Number 1, you've got a little grid here that we have to fill in, and it says, put a check mark for what formula teams can do to their vehicles. So we have 3 categories. We have they can design their own chassis, they can produce their own tires, and they must use the same engines. So for F1 teams, are they allowed to design their own chassis? Yes. So put a check mark there. Now, for produce their own tires, no, they can't. They have to use that exclusive tire company. And must they use the same engines? No, they have a choice of 4. And then for the F2 teams, are they allowed to design their own chassis? No. And the tire thing, it's the same for both. But do they have to use the same engines? Yes.
OK, 这一题要我们勾选方程式的车队可以对自己的车辆可以做什么？那我们看到 F1 车队他们可以自行设计车辆底盘，所以这个地方打个勾。那这个 F2 车队呢，他们必须使用相同的引擎。好，我们在这个地方打个勾。
Okay, number 2. Choose the statements that correctly describe F3.
好，那要我们选出正确描述 F3 的说法。
Well, there are only 2 from this long list. We have A, it has international championships, along with C, the length of its races is shorter than that of F2's.
好，我们要选的正确是 A， 就是 F3 它有国际锦标赛。另外呢，我们要选 C， 它的比赛长度比 F2 还要短。
And number 3, which phrase in the passage, a phrase is a group of words, which phrase means supportive of or providing the right conditions for something good to happen?
好，本文中哪个片语的意思是支持，或者是为好事情提供适当的发生的条件？
And that answer is conducive to.
好，答案是 conducive to.
Okay, that's it for our November 22nd lesson, The Road to F1. Until the next time, bye-bye.
Bye.